These are 3 signs that you've experienced a spiritual awakening. My name is Carolyn Yakopich. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Now, when we go through a spiritual awakening, or what we can also call a Kundalini awakening, Kundalini is simply your energy of full potential. It's your full creative potential. And when this wakes up in our body and starts to activate our higher brain centers and our connection to the divine, we start to shift in our consciousness and we have this experience that is more expansive, and yet it comes with its own challenges and its own different situations that will give us an indication that we're going through it. Now, we don't only have one awakening, we continuously wake up and we continuously activate and ascend to higher states of consciousness. And this is the ascension process. So what happens is we may have a habit or a behavior or a pattern or an issue, challenge, struggle that we go through, and it happens to us and we're here. And then we evolve and we learn from that lesson, and then we are now up here and we meet back at that same point, that same lesson, yet from a higher vantage point of consciousness. And we experience the same thing, and it is an opportunity to reflect and see how much we've grown, and also an opportunity to choose something different and to move and grow even more from that experience. And so the first sign of a spiritual awakening is having a greater understanding and awareness of our habits, our beliefs, our behaviors, and our emotions. What ends up happening is we start to be more observant and more aware, meaning that we're not linked right into it and we don't completely go down with it and lose ourselves in the emotion and lose ourselves in the habit. And I mean, this happens in layers and levels. So sometimes I've heard many times when people are like, I had a Kundalini awakening and it was horrible and my whole life fell apart. And a lot of things rearrange when we have a spiritual awakening. This is true. Yet there is a way to be able to navigate and move through these new states of being and consciousness and new states of awareness to actually shift and change our habits, behaviors, beliefs, and emotions to match the new frequency, that new opening, that new spiritual awareness that we do have. For me, Kundalini yoga was a lifesaver. I was an addict for 22 years of my life, and in that process of going through many different spiritual teachings, I was always on a pendulum swinging back and forth between addiction actively and then jumping into teachings, feeling like I was off my path. And in the end of my path, it was getting really, 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 really bad. And I found Kundalini yoga, or it found me. And in the first class, I felt this activated energy within me. And it was this next level of awareness. And I heard clearly from Spirit in that moment, you can't keep living 2 lives. It's time to stay on the path. And so I kept lying to myself by going back into addiction. And I know there was a big fear for me around really being visible and showing up and sharing my wisdom and my experience and my gifts. And so it was a way for me to hide and a way for me to repress the possibility and the potential of what was being held inside of me. And so within 2.5 months of my first class, I chose sobriety. And this completely shifted my entire life. Now, Kundalini yoga being for me a catalyst for that change also really helped me to create a space within my body where I could hold and receive and allow the information to move through my body, the new information, the light, the spiritual awareness, my next levels that I kept evolving into. And it really assists the body to feel a relaxed state when the upgrades and downloads are happening. And so I feel like this was part of the struggle for me, was that I was continuously having activations, and then I would really freak out because it was too much and it was a lot to face. And so naturally going into alcoholism and drugs and moving into that path was numbing the feeling, numbing the sensation, numbing the opening. And I know in past videos, I have shared about this, that when we receive these higher frequencies, and I mean, the last few years have been amping up, and there has been so much evolution happening and shifts and changes within the world, both in and out. And it feels like this energy, right? I said this, I believe, in two videos ago or so, where I was talking about the energy coming in, and it's so fast. It's like you can't even contain it, and it feels like very uncomfortable, and it can cause, those two ends of the spectrum, either full on excitement or full on anxiety. And if we can come to a space where our body is a clear vessel and a clear channel, it is a lot easier to allow that flow and that influx of light and energy to come through the body. And what this light does is it starts to wash all the residual energy away, and it really highlights the density, highlights the things that are no longer serving us. So when we start to have this greater awareness of our habits that are no longer serving us, we have a choice point. When we see our behaviors are not matching our potential and who we know we are at our core on a soul level, it's a choice. We have a choice to make in those moments. When we catch ourselves being triggered and actively in that trigger, it's an opportunity to self-regulate. And so finding a program or a meditation, a mentor, a teacher, a coach, whatever it is that is going to assist you to create that space in your body, to deepen your awareness, to get into that opening so that you can relax and receive without freaking out and without having to resort to negative behaviors to deal with the upheaval that happens and occurs as we ascend more quickly. So the first sign of the spiritual awakening is having that greater awareness and making the choice of what to do with that awareness. We either choose to stay in the old habits and behaviors and patterns and belief systems. And the belief systems are a big one as well. Like, what are we believing about ourselves that is holding us back from being in our full potential? What are we believing about the world that makes us untrusting of showing who we truly are? And to course correct those beliefs. So we have this greater awareness. Now, what will we do with it? Now, the second sign of spiritual awakening is relationships changing. Now, this one can be tough, especially when we have attachments to certain people in our life, and also certain ways of relating within our relationships. So we may have a relationship and we might relate on a certain level and around certain things. Maybe we do certain activities together. And for an example, as I chose to not partake in alcohol and drugs and I became sober, my relationships shifted around me. And some relationships naturally dissolved. Others I chose to walk away from. And everything started rearranging around me to match my new state of being, my new frequency and vibration. And it's tough sometimes when we have friends that have been with us for, a couple decades or our entire lives, and suddenly we find that we have stepped into this new state of being and we're on that soul trajectory and we're aligned with our destiny now. And then suddenly things start falling away, things shift and change. And so there is a little bit of grieving and sometimes a lot of grieving that comes with that, the release of those relationships. And it truly is an invitation to look at it from an energetic standpoint. There have been so many times that I've seen things starting to rearrange in my life and relationships. Even this is an example. I've had people reach out to me and say, let's get together, we'll make a plan. And then I will say yes, and I will give a couple of options and none of them work. And then they say, okay, I'll get back to you. And then they never get back to me. And I already know that my frequency and their frequency are no longer a match. And so it doesn't surprise me when they don't reach out, and this is the nature of what happens. So it's not personal. It's an energetic thing. It's not a personal thing. It's an energetic thing. So this is something to remember. And it is a little bit comforting to remember this in those moments because it is really impactful as our relationships shift and change. But I want to remind you that as the relationships that no longer serve you start to dissolve and start to fade away, you are creating space so that new, more aligned relationships will enter your life. And as these new relationships enter your life, you will start to see the evidence of how these new relationships support your evolution and your growth and your expansion and you stepping into the fullness and truth and realness of who you are at your core. And that is something really beautiful to be celebrated. And so if you're not there yet, if you're not seeing the evidence of these new relationships entering, just know that they are on their way. They truly are. The more that you can let go of the old that is no longer serving you with the relationships, and you are able to accept that, okay, I'm ready to step into this new embodied empowerment of who I am, and you trust in the divine order and the timing of all of this, the quicker that these new relationships will enter your life. And so, number 3, we have our third sign of spiritual or Kundalini awakening. And it is seeing the signs. We start to see signs and synchronicities all around us. And this can show up in many different ways. So seeing consecutive numbers, 1111, 222, 333, we start to see different signs showing up. And it's not only in that way. Sometimes we receive messages. So I've had instances where there is something within my consciousness and I am feeling drawn to something. And I don't even speak it into being. There's nothing that has been said. I have not shared it with anybody. And then all of a sudden, the next person I'm relating with and I'm hanging out with, they're asking me about that very thing. And then the next moment, I'm seeing it again. And then, of course, somebody else reaches out to me and talks about the same thing. So it's like it just keeps showing up, more evidence, more evidence, more evidence of what is being birthed within me. And it's leading me on my soul's adventure. It's truly guiding me and giving me signs and symbols to affirm what I already know inside of myself. And this, through this like signs and synchronicities, there could be little things. Like I'm going to share, this is a story about my dear friend Christy. So she shared with me today, she had her entire day, and this will be a whole new video talking eventually about divine timing. It is such a key theme in the collective right now. And she had a day that was full of divine timing today. And she decided to stop her car and make a video about divine timing. And as she was making the video, she saw an albino squirrel, a white squirrel. How many times does anyone see an albino squirrel? She flipped her camera and videotaped the albino squirrel on the lawn in front of her. So she randomly stopped. She didn't, she was driving. She randomly stopped her car to make this video. The albino squirrel is there. I looked up the significance of albino squirrels, and they are 1 in 100,000. 1 in 100,000. And they represent the coming of age and strength and resilience and good luck. And to really step into that alignment of the coming of age within yourself. So how profound is that? So this is what I mean by synchronicities. And they start showing up, and it's like one after the other after the other. And the more that you open to the miracles in the ordinary that are here all the time, the more that they show up. And all that is required for that to happen is our presence. All that's required is our presence, to be aware. So that first sign, the deeper awareness and that greater awareness, the more that we can shift into presence, which will help us to shift those habits, behaviors, beliefs, and emotions, and be present with what is and still within the self. That is going to also greater assist us to see the signs, the synchronicities, and the messages that are here and available for us each and every day, each and every moment. And so with this being said, I'm going to leave it here. There's much more to say on the topic, and I will be back sharing more updates. If you would like to stay connected, subscribe to my YouTube channel, like this video, and I will see you again very soon.